The following program contains shocking challenges to Republicans. If you suffer from blind party loyalty, this show might not be right for you. Check with the Tea Party leader.
Proclaiming the truth in the highways and byways of the world. Fighting for justice in the dark alleys of politics. Raising the voice of resistance to a fevered pitch. And he knows where to find the best and worst jail food in America. Randall Terry.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the Voice of Resistance. It is I, your servant, Randall, where comedy meets reality. The comedy is that Obama and Boehner, they're trying to raise the debt ceiling and pretend that they're dealing with entitlements. We've got a lot to talk about in today's program. We'll show you a couple of clips from Boehner. We have the final segment of our interview with Steve Deace. And as always, a little bit of comedy thrown in there just to make the spoonful of medicine go down. Today's program brought to you in part by President Obama, the best darn master of the federal plantation we've ever had. And by John Boehner, the best darn foreman Obama has ever had. I'll be right back after a quick and abrasive word from my friend, Sir Reginald Bling. Just turn the thing on. I got something to say. Barack Hussein Obama, Nancy Pelosi, John Boehner, Mitch McConnell, the farming guy, whatever he is, and Harry Reid, they are now meeting in secret negotiations to raise the debt ceiling. What is this, some kind of a dance move? Raise the debt ceiling? Homie, this is a runaway train. They are talking about enslaving you, your children, your grandchildren, heck, your great-grandchildren to their debt. All because they don't want to get rid of entitlements. What? You think we are entitled to be your slave labor force until the end of time? Folks, we are being railroaded. Wake up! Welcome, friends, to a special edition of Randall Terry, the Voice of Resistance. What makes it special is this obnoxious green screen. We're still building our studio. I hope, I pray that by the end of July, the first week of August, we are broadcasting from our magnificent, huge new studio. And I'm promising you, you are going to love it. All right. I think it was yesterday's program that I talked to you about what matters is, number one, what do you believe? Number two, what will you say? And number three, what will you do? The first thing is, what do you believe? What do you believe about raising the national debt? What do you believe about so-called entitlements? Are people really entitled to live off of the sweat of your brow? Or are you really entitled to force your neighbor to pay for cash for clunkers or for your mortgage or for your health care, for your food or whatever? Where did this concept come from of you are entitled to this? Well, of course, it came from Karl Marx. From each according to his ability, to each according to his need. That's a Marxist idiom. That's a Marxist premise about how the world should be and how a government should function. That it should have the right, with the power of the gun, to take money from one group of people and redistribute that wealth to another. Well, what do you believe about that? Do you believe it's true? Do you believe it's false? Do you believe that it's justice, or do you believe that it's theft? Well, the answer to that question lies squarely in the Judeo-Christian principles that are found in the Old and New Testament, the laws of God. God said, "You shall not steal." And the bumper sticker says, the government says, "You shall not steal." Because God and the government don't like competition. They want to have a monopoly on stealing from us. All right. Number one, what do you believe? Number two, what are you willing to say? Are you willing, if you don't believe in entitlements, are you willing to say it in a family setting? Are you willing to get into an argument over it with a neighbor at the Christmas dinner, at Thanksgiving? In what context are you willing to take your beliefs that are in here and to verbalize them? And then, of course, number three, what are you willing to do? It's one thing for us to talk about these issues in the safety of our Christian ghettos. It's something quite different to take it into the public square, into political races, will you run for office? Will you pour your heart and soul out to get somebody elected to office who actually wants you and your children to be free? Will you fight for life and liberty under God? Or will you just stay back there and wring your hands and think, well, yeah, it's bad and someone should do something. Who is someone and why aren't they doing anything? Well, to quote Jesse Jackson, you are somebody. Maybe it's your turn to step up to the plate and to fight. All right, let's get to the debt ceiling. As you know, John Boehner and President Obama are taking their turns in front of the microphones, but it's almost comical in some ways to watch because they say oftentimes the same things. In fact, watch this 5-second clip from John Boehner, this pillar of Jello.
I would agree with the president. The national debt limit must be raised.
Well, there you have it. They agree. The debt ceiling should be raised. We should take more and more Americans and enslave them. Not for years, but for decades. Not just the current taxpayers, but your children, your grandchildren. They should be paying interest to the Chinese for decades to come. Why? So that we can have entitlements. Well, John Boehner, trying to appear that he doesn't exactly agree with the president, said that he can't get a bill passed in Congress unless every dollar that the debt ceiling is raised is met by a dollar and then some of cuts in spending and on real reform to entitlements. Here's what he said.
Listen, I agree with the president. We cannot allow our nation to default on our debt. But to prevent a default, a bill must pass the Congress. And a bill that doesn't meet these tests can't pass the House of Representatives.
Well, I appreciate the fact that he said that, and listen closely to me. He's playing to the Tea Party members, and he's playing to the conservative bloc in the electorate that brought the Republicans the majority in the last election. But the question is this: does John Boehner possess the backbone to make good on these threats? Because if they don't raise the debt ceiling, we're approaching yet another government shutdown. Well, the last time there was about to be a government shutdown, Boehner blinked over something as mundane on one hand, or as principally sound on another, as defunding Planned Parenthood. Remember when it was time to honor his promises that he would defund Planned Parenthood? What did he do? He caved in. He ran like a frightened schoolgirl. Well, friends, I'm telling you right now, they are going to raise the debt ceiling, and they are not going to have spending cuts that match it. Unless there is the sleight of hand where they reduce the rate of growth over the next 10 years and then call that a spending cut. That's the one place where they trick us over and over again, where they boldly come forward and say, we've cut spending, but the debt continues to go up. So how did you cut spending? We have another deficit. How did you cut spending? Well, what they mean is they slowed the rate of growth. So in other words, instead of the debt mushrooming at this rate, it's mushrooming at this rate. Oh, look, what a great decrease that is in the spending of your money. It's all a scam, friends. John Boehner is stuck between a rock and a hard place. And he does have to fear the Tea Party members in the House, and he does have to fear the Tea Party electorate. But the simple matter is this: they've got to raise the debt ceiling. America cannot default on her debts, so they're going to raise the debt ceiling. Do I think they should? No. That's a whole nother show. But they're going to raise the debt ceiling, and Obama is going to agree to do some trimming around the edges of entitlements. But trust me, either the Bush tax cuts are gone, or they're going to find some way to raise the taxes on a small percentage of the American people, because most of the people in the country, including many of you, are socialists at heart. And they believe that we should have a graduating scale of an income tax. They believe that people who make more money should not only pay more taxes, but that they should pay a higher percentage of their taxes. That, my friend, comes right out of the Marxist playbook. And most of us, God forgive us and God save us, most of us were catechized from the Marxist playbook. I'm going to take a break. When we come back, more brilliant analysis, and not to mention that great interview with Stephen Dace, the final segment coming up. And tomorrow, we've got this really weird thing on bats. Close-ups of bats. It's hideous. You're not going to want to miss it.
Randall and I were watching a presidential broadcast when he turned to me and said, "How can I express my contempt for this man without using language too foul for broadcast?" I said, "That's easy, Randall. Just say, Johnson is a perfect example of why there's so many more of those than there are of horses."
Moments with Moses. They will stumble over one another, as if to escape a sword, though none pursues. And you shall have no power to stand before your enemies.
Welcome back to the program, friend. I apologize again for broadcasting from a green screen, but soon our studio will be done. In our next segment, we have the final installment of our interview with Stephen Dace. You're not going to want to miss it. One of the clearest thinking men that I have interviewed in a long time. As a setup to that, let me ask you a question. Do you believe in good and evil? Do you believe that some things are intrinsically good and that other things are intrinsically evil? Do you believe that there are moral absolutes? Something is always right and something is always wrong. If so, what makes something always right or always wrong? Is it a majority vote? Is it a Supreme Court decision? Is it the will of the people? Remember, the French Revolution said the voice of the people is the voice of God. Is it how a person feels? Does every person get to choose for themselves what is right and what is wrong? To follow that inner light, their own inner feelings, their own inner desires? Do each of us get to decide what is right and what is wrong? Well, for those of you who are not believers in moral absolutes, I'll ask you this. Was it wrong what Hitler did to the Jews, yes or no? And if it was wrong, what made it always wrong? Because you feel that it's wrong? Because you think that it's wrong? Because it's wrong to kill people? Says who? I mean, if we're all just the chance arrangement of molecules, if we all just evolved from some primal swamp, then what makes it intrinsically evil to kill another human being? After all, the first law of the animal kingdom is the survival of the fittest. So if we can kill some of the weaker members, maybe we're doing the whole human race a service. The reason I say this is because most of us, Christian and non-Christian alike, those of us who claim to believe the Old Testament, the law of Moses, the New Testament, the words of Christ, most of us have been trained to think in terms of moral relativism, where everyone gets to choose for themselves what's right and what's wrong, or that ethics are not fixed. Well, if that is the case, then ultimately you get to decide what's right, you get to decide what's wrong, we all do, and we are all in a moral free fall. Ultimately, nothing is good, nothing is evil. It's just a vast, endless sea of gray. And I refuse to live in a world like that, because first of all, it's false, and second of all, it's tyrannical. It ends in the oppression of the innocent. I'm going to take a quick break. When we come back, final segment with Stephen Dace. Don't go away. Welcome back to the program.
Look, when you get as famous as me, you got to do your own car work too, okay? Don't be alarmed, I'm a professional on a closed track.
An appeaser is one who feeds the crocodile, hoping it will eat him last. Sir Winston Churchill. Welcome back to the program, friend. And now, the final installment of our interview with Stephen Dace, author of the upcoming book, We Won't Get Fooled Again, dealing with how the Christian right, as such a huge voting bloc, has failed so miserably in obtaining policy victories. In other words, a change in the law. We'll play the rest of this interview, and then when I come back from our next break, we'll go to one of the words of our founding fathers. Hope you enjoy this.
State would
Say those three names again.
Iowa Christian Alliance, which, by the way, is run by a Republican national committeeman in our state. Iowa Faith and Freedom Coalition and Iowa Right to Life would not take a stand on life at conception at all.
Well, they work behind the scenes against it,
And I was going to add that. And behind the scenes, they were actually working against it. Yes.
Right, so I want you to remember those three names. You see them on the screen. This is the tip of the iceberg. As you know, we've been broadcasting from D.C. for 3 years. This type of treachery is endemic throughout the religious right. Yeah. These little groups are simply echoing their national offices in D.C.
Yeah.
And you, dear friend, if you're giving money to these groups, you'd be safer for the kingdom of God and for babies. You'd be safer to take your money and flush it down a toilet, because at least there it won't fund those people that are actually working against the babies.
I'm saddened to say, after 3 years of, here in the First in the Nation caucus state, I've gotten a lot of access to the national political apparatus, because that's why you're here. You guys all come to us. And so most guys that broadcast in the 89th largest market like I did don't get access to some of the people I've gotten access to. So I've had a chance to interview these people, and I wish I could say to your audience, that's a radical statement, that's foolish, you're over the top, and walk out of here because I'm offended. I have come, sadly, to the same conclusion. And I think we have to make a key decision. Choose ye this day whom you will serve. Do we want to regulate evil, or do we want to eradicate it? Do we want to vanquish it?
Where's more money? Where's more money?
Well,
I just want money. So was there more money in the regulation side of it?
There's more money in the regulation side of it because it's a perpetuation cycle.
Well, listen, I mean, prostitution is the oldest business in the history of the world. If there's money in this, let's talk about it, man. Just let's slow down that whole principle thing.
I mean, listen, that's the other motto of the Republican Party. There's gold in them hills. I agree with that. One of the things I saw Dick Morris at Fox News say once I thought was a brilliant analysis. He said, let me tell you who doesn't want to see Roe versus Wade go away. He said it's the Republican Party, and he explained why. And he said, before Roe versus Wade, evangelicals weren't even politically involved in America. The vast majority of Catholics voted for Democrats. I mean, the Roe versus Wade created an alliance of evangelicals and Catholics that completed the three-legged stool of Reagan's coalition. If that were to be removed, the biggest losers in America would be the Republican Party coffers, because they have used that as a rallying cry and a recruiting tool for voters and activists for a generation. And I sadly believe he is right. And I've come to that conclusion because by their fruit you will know them. These Republicans have done nothing at all that would end the slaughter of innocent lives. Correct. But they've done a lot to try to regulate it little by little with things that in the end are full of sound and fury and signifying nothing.
Right. All right, last thing. Talk to my viewers all over the nation about the value, the strategic value of me running as a Democrat against Obama.
What I think is interesting about it is that I once did a bit on my show where I was looking for jackalopes, unicorns, and pro-life Democrats, and we couldn't find any of those things. And I think there's a lot of folks who buy into, have a misguided notion of neo-socialism because they think it's compassionate. And therefore they fancy themselves, well, I'm pro-life, but we ought to help the poor. I'm pro-life and we ought to help the elderly. And they end up funding the very government scheme that's killing these children. And it's a self-refuting logic. So when people like you cross over to that side of the aisle, you expose the nakedness of this lie, which is one of the things I must admit I'm sort of enamored by. But the other thing that this is going to do is these sorts of ads that you're running and the size of the ad buy that you're running, particularly because of how you've strategically placed them in the right places in Iowa, you are going to compel conversation on this because you're saying the stuff the leftists hate hearing. And what they're going to do is they're going to run to every one of these Republican presidential candidates and they're going to ask them all, do you agree with this? Will you condemn this? And it will be very interesting to watch how they react to that.
Also, one other reason I'm doing this is because the Republicans are going to do their annual or their quadrangle every 4-year cannibal feast. They're going to feast on each other. They're going to fight each other. Yeah. And Obama is going to walk through this thing unscathed.
Yes.
I can throw body punches at Obama and at least make sure that Obama's wounded during the primary cycle.
Yep. And he's also got $1 billion war chest. And I think the other thing he's got working against him is elections are almost always a referendum on the incumbent. And the Republicans have already caved on Obamacare. They've already caved on Planned Parenthood. Now, they may not cave on the debt ceiling, but the more and more the Republicans cave in Washington, it'll make it to the point it doesn't matter who's nominated for president, because you're going to take all of the wedge issues that you can hurt Obama with off of the table. You're going to hamstring your own candidate, tie his hands behind, or her, tie their hands behind their back before the battle even begins.
Mitt Romney is Obama with white skin.
Well, you know, Robert Reich, you know, another reason I just at times just can't stand the Republicans, they make me agree with Robert Reich. Former Clinton Labor Secretary, I thought, said something very snarky and very correct. He said, what do you get when you take Tim Pawlenty's cap and trade, Mitt Romney's health care, and John Huntsman's China policy? What do you get?
Probably Obama.
He said, Barack Obama's first term. That's what you get.
Steve, it's been a delight to have you. I wish you success in your endeavors. I can't wait to see the book, and I'm happy to write an appendix for you on some of the stuff I've seen.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
God bless you.
Same to you. Take care.
We'll be right back, ladies and gentlemen. Be not silent, O God of my praise, for wicked and deceitful mouths are opened against me, speaking against me with lying tongues.
William Penn said, "Those people who will not be governed by God will be ruled by tyrants." Friends, it's clear we're being ruled by tyrants. People who promote the murder of babies, homosexual marriage, enslaving us to unfathomable debt. People who are stealing the hard-earned labor of one group of people and redistributing it to another. We're being ruled by tyrants. Why? Because we refuse to be governed by God. Again and again on this program, I read to you quotes from one of our founding fathers in which they proudly proclaim that Judeo-Christian principles or the ethics of Christianity are a part of the very foundation of this government and are a source of America's liberties. As our political leaders, and our religious leaders for that matter, have turned their backs on revealed law, Judeo-Christian law, the Judeo-Christian principles of the Bible, we have become enslaved and ruled by tyrants who will bring us back to truth.